To continue with the digestive system, we'll look at the pancreas. So the pancreas is a retroperitoneal organ that's just below the stomach. It's just outside the greater curvature of the stomach. It's kind of shaped a little bit like a tadpole. The head of it is encircled by the duodenum, and the tail of it, the pointy end, goes right over to the spleen, way over to the left side of the body. It has two functions. Everybody seems to know the endocrine function, secreting insulin and glucagon in its control of blood sugar. But the exocrine function is probably its more important function. This is really its function in the digestive system. And it secretes a bunch of different enzymes that all come together and form what's called pancreatic juice. So there are secretory cells that secrete each enzyme, and there are cells that secrete a bicarbonate rich medium for those enzymes to be in, that also neutralizes the hydrochloric acid from the stomach that's in the chyme. So each kind of unit of the pancreas ends up looking like this. There's a lot of little cells. Some of them are secreting the medium, some of them are secreting the enzymes, but they're all secretory cells. These are things that are for export, so there's a lot of rough endoplasmic reticulum. It takes a lot of energy, so there's a lot of mitochondria. These things are being synthesized, so there's a lot of ribosomes on that rough endoplasmic reticulum, lots of messenger RNA being made, etc. So the juice is this real alkaline solution, and it's just as alkaline as the chyme is acidic, and that's because the blood that the alkaline solution is made from comes after the acidity has been taken out of it to make the hydrochloric acid in the stomach. The blood vessels kind of are one after the other. Lots of bicarbonate, HCO3 minus, because that's what's going to neutralize the hydrochloric acid. What happens is the HCO3 minus meets the HCl. The H leaves the HCl to go on to this, which then becomes H2CO3, which then becomes water and carbon dioxide. The enzymes that are in it are there to break down all of the different types of food molecules. Amylase breaks down starches. Lipase breaks down fats. Nucleases break down nucleic acids, so DNA and RNA and things like that. And proteases break down proteins. Now the proteins have started to break down already because of the peptase, the pepsin in the stomach, but this starts to break those large polypeptides down into smaller polypeptides, maybe even dipeptides. Now, because the ductwork and everything in the pancreas are made primarily of proteins, the proteases are all secreted in an inactive form, the same way that pepsinogen is secreted before it becomes pepsin. And then they become activated once they mix with the chyme. The amylases, lipases, and nucleases are just secreted in an active form because they won't hurt the tubes that they're going through. But they become better once they mix with the chyme. Bile helps with that. So there's a couple of different proteases. One's called trypsinogen, which becomes trypsin once it gets into the small intestine. There's carboxypeptidase and chymotrypsinogen, and so these things all just break down proteins. Don't memorize the names. Just call them proteases, enzymes that break down proteins. They are all mixed with the chyme in the duodenum. There's a chain reaction to activate them. There are brush border enzymes that activate trypsinogen to become trypsin, and then the trypsin causes the other ones to become their active forms. It's just a chain reaction. The bile that is secreted along with this pancreatic juice through the hepatopancreatic ampulla is really stimulated by having bile salts in the circulation and fat in the chyme. I've already mentioned cholecystokinin, which causes the gallbladder to contract, right? And this is when there are fats in the chyme. Now, interestingly enough, when people have gallstones, concretions in the bile, that this contraction can really hurt because it blocks the bile duct. And so they avoid fat in the diet to stop this contraction from happening. But I'll maintain that too low of fat in your diet beforehand is what causes the gallstones in the first place. The bile, if it's used up, doesn't have time to concentrate as much. The cholecystokinin not only has the bile squirting in, but it causes the sphincter of Oddi to relax and allows more of the pancreatic juices in. Again, it's regulated by the chyme itself, the pancreatic juice release. So chyme enters, it causes cells to release hormones, which then feed back and cause all of this to happen. We're not going to get too crazy about each step of the way. So then what happens? So now the chyme, which is some partially digested proteins, I wouldn't go and even say too much partially digested carbohydrates or fats or nucleic acids, ends up in the duodenum. It comes, as I said before, in like a piping bag, squirting into the duodenum, so it comes in measured slow amounts. It takes a long time for the stomach to empty, right? The chyme enters, which then stimulates the pancreatic juice and the bile to enter, and then the duodenum is involved with mixing this together. The mixing happens because of segmentation. It's kind of like kneading bread or kneading. As you squeeze, it moves backwards and forwards and causes mixing. I don't know why this is there right now, but the microvilli, which is on the surface of the cell membrane. This is a very magnified image. Has got all of these proteins on it that will act as enzymes. So this is the brush border, not the villi. what happens is you get this kneading, mixing segmentation, and then a wave of peristalsis that moves things along, and then more kneading, mixing, segmentation, and another wave of peristalsis. And these waves of peristalsis just move things along the small intestine. So they kind of alternate until it moves down into the large intestine. The enteric neurons, the enteric nervous system, really coordinates the movement of this. So this stuff moves right along the small intestine, and as it's moving, these enzymes break down the various foodstuffs. Now, complex carbohydrates are broken down by amylase, starting in the salivary amylase. Then the pancreatic amylase breaks them down further. So things go from complex carbohydrates to usually disaccharides, things that are 2 sugars large. They can't be absorbed as 2 sugars. So say they get down to lactose or sucrose. In order to absorb them, they have to be broken down into their monosaccharides. And there's an enzyme that will do this. And there's an enzyme for maltose, there's an enzyme for sucrose, there's an enzyme for lactose. And it breaks things down into its monosaccharides, the fructose and glucose, etc., that can be absorbed. Now, this final enzymatic breakdown happens because of enzymes that are part of the brush border. They are in the cell membrane of these absorptive cells. And when these disaccharides touch that place, they are broken down into monosaccharides and immediately absorbed into the bloodstream. If you are missing the ones that will break things down, the lactose, you are lactose intolerant. So people that just don't make that enzyme, they can't digest those milk sugars. Now, the same thing is going to happen with proteins. The pepsin in the stomach breaks down large proteins into fairly large polypeptides. The proteases from the pancreas, the trypsin, and etc., will break these large polypeptides into small polypeptides. But the brush border enzymes break these small polypeptides down into individual amino acids, and it's the individual amino acids that are absorbed into the blood. The nucleases from the pancreas break down nucleic acids, DNA and RNA, from the cells of the food, and then, but these are still little chains. They're broken down into the A's and C's and C's and G's and U's by the brush border enzymes, and then they're absorbed into the body where they get reused. The only thing that doesn't go that way are the fats. The lipases break down the fats into smaller fatty acids and such, but those things are fat soluble, so they just pass through the cell membrane easily and are absorbed directly. Now, the absorption happens, all the water soluble stuff goes into the blood in the villi. All the fat soluble stuff ends up in the lymphatic capillary that's in the villi, and turns into this milky stuff, called chyle, and then enters the bloodstream at the thoracic duct and the right lymphatic duct, as we talked about before. By the time we get through the ileum, all of this has happened. There's been a lot of time, lots of segmentation, lots of mixing, lots of brush border enzymes, lots of enzymatic breakdown of the food. A lot of the water has been reabsorbed. All the nutrients have been reabsorbed. Anything that can't be digested and absorbed ends up going through the ileocecal valve and into the large intestine. There's a little flap, and the ileocecal valve becomes a one-way thing. So hopefully becomes a one-way thing. And all of this stuff